Good morning. I'm TJ. I'm the Assistant Director of South Carolina Humanities. South Carolina Humanities is the state program of the National Endowment for the Humanities, so we're primarily federally funded. We are a nonprofit organization, so we're not a state agency like the majority of the rest of my co-presenters here, and we don't currently receive any state funds. We were founded in 1972, so we just recently celebrated our 50th anniversary, and we serve the state, but we are located here in Columbia with our offices. So this is the big question that we are often approached about is what are the humanities? Um, our office gets calls occasionally for the Humane Society. We get calls for the Human Affairs Commission. We get calls for Habitat for Humanity. So clearly there's some confusion out there about what we are and what the humanities are. But these are the disciplines that make up the humanities, and I won't read them out to you. Y'all can look them over. But I will just briefly take a moment to explain the difference between the humanities and the arts, and you'll hear in a little bit from the South Carolina Arts Commission. When in the 1960s, when the federal government created the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Endowment for the Arts as two different federal agencies, they kind of drew a line between those two disciplines. Where there's actually a lot of gray area, but we have to follow certain guidelines that we only fund the humanities, while other groups are only funding the arts. So the best way I've ever heard it explained is how my executive director says it. He says, artists do, humanists talk about it. So as South Carolina Humanities can't fund the outright creation or performance or display of art, but we do fund the disciplines, as you see in the list, of art history, art theory, and art criticism. So basically, people talking about the meaning behind art, the importance of art, the history behind art. So we could fund a program on sweetgrass baskets and the culture of it, but we couldn't fund an outright creation of pottery. So we have a variety of different grants. They are all for public humanities programs. We don't fund any general operating expenses. We don't fund any construction or acquisitions or things like that either. All of our grants are for public programs, things like documentaries, exhibits, lecture series, festivals, conferences, oral histories, discussion forums. Those are just some examples. So our largest grant is our major grant. They have a maximum request of $15,000. All of our grants require a one-to-one match. So if you're asking us for $15,000, you need to also show that your organization is contributing $15,000 towards the cost of the program for a total program budget of at least $30,000. We accept major grants twice a year. The next deadline coming up is in January for programs that start after March 15th. And you can find information about how to apply on our website. We're actually in the process of switching to an online grant application system. So that will be being used by the time that major grant deadline comes around. These are a couple of examples of some major grants that we have funded. A Gullah Geechee Community Day at Coastal Carolina University. We funded the Haygood Mill Historic Site to create some field trip packages, both on-site and virtual. The Georgetown County Library is currently doing a lecture series about their 225th anniversary, and this major exhibit at the Columbia Museum of Art about Catawba pottery. So that's an example where the arts and the humanities do overlap in a way that we could fund it. All right. We also have mini grants and planning grants. They are both a maximum request of $5,000. They are both accepted monthly on the first business day of the month for programs that start after the 15th of the following month. Mini grants are for a public humanities program of smaller costs than our major grants. Planning grants are awarded to support preliminary work in designing a project that requires detailed planning because of its length, scope, or cost. Some examples of mini grants we funded recently at Roper Mountain Science Center. We supported some outdoor signage in their historic farm area. Kids on Point in Charleston offered a week-long summer enrichment program for high school students. And some examples of planning grants. We often see planning grants with documentary films. That's the one on the bottom where they may need to do initial scripting or research to get to the point where they could actually do the production costs. We offer fast track literary grants in partnership with the South Carolina Arts Commission with support from them. Fast track literary grants are for public literary programs, such as, but not limited to, writers' series, festivals, conferences, workshops, or writers' residencies at schools. The National Endowment for the Humanities considers creative writing to be an art, so we can't just support outright creative writing workshops or programs like that. But if the creative writing is a creative writing element is along with, you know, interpretation of a written word, an author speaking, that would be in line with what we could fund. These grants are offered quarterly, with with the next deadline being December 1st for programs that start after January 15th. Some examples of fast track literary grants that we funded recently: a library con, Comic-Con in York County, and a new play festival in Greenville. They had a panel discussion about what makes a good play and how does the development process work. So that's the interpretation of the art of doing theater. One of our newest grant categories is the Accessibility and Inclusion Grant. It's intended to support making public humanities programs and collections more accessible to diverse public audiences. So funds can be used for things like translation and captioning services, ASL interpreters, materials for the visually impaired, student transportation expenses, or even childcare to make programs more accessible to families. That's not an exhaustive list. We've seen a lot of creative applications come through that aren't one of those things. Main thing is we still cannot fund construction costs. So it's not like we could fund a ramp or an accessible bathroom or something like that. And the maximum request is only $2,000, so you wouldn't be able to do much construction with that anyway. Those are accepted on a rolling basis. This is one of our programs that we offer. We have a speakers bureau, Humanities Out Loud program. We have a roster of over 40 speakers who speak on a variety of diverse topics, ranging from growing up Gullah to poetry and public life to Chautauqua style impersonations of historical figures. We make these speakers available to nonprofit groups and public agencies for public programs that they're making open and accessible to the general public. Although we also do programs at schools and retirement communities. So those ones aren't generally open to the general public. But mostly these are used by libraries, historical societies, and museums for public programs. We pay $350 directly to the speaker. For many of our speakers, that's all they'll ask for. Some of them occasionally ask for additional honoraria or travel expenses, depending on where they're traveling, so that you can ask me on a case-by-case basis about which speakers ask for additional money. But the application is simple. It's on our website already. You can do it online, and it's very basic. So this is just a small program. We call it a small program grant. One of the other public programs that South Carolina Humanities does is through our partnership with the Smithsonian Institution. We bring traveling Smithsonian exhibits to South Carolina that are intended to go to small towns and rural communities through the Museum on Main Street department of the Smithsonian. So we currently have one of these exhibits traveling the state. It's called Spark, Places of Innovation, and it is currently at the Marlborough County Museum. Our next traveling Smithsonian exhibit will tour the state starting in 2026. We'll start accepting applications in 2025. It's called Americans. It looks at stories of American Indian images, names, and stories, and how they're used in American history and contemporary life. So the other programs that we offer, we have the South Carolina Awards in the Humanities Luncheon and Awards Ceremony, which is actually coming up in less than 2 weeks, where we honor 6 individuals from South Carolina with contributions in humanities. We have our Humanities Festival every year in different communities. We just had the 2024 one in North Augusta in September, and the 2025 one will be in Lancaster. We do 2 traveling exhibits we work in connection with South Carolina State Museum on. One is called South Carolina, the Food We Celebrate, and the other is called Resilience and Revolution, Native Peoples in 18th Century South Carolina. So that one is very related to virtually everyone. Thank you.